I speak with lots of kids who are questioning why they should have a bar or bat mitzvah or why they should be confirmed when they don't actually believe in the God described in the Torah or liturgy. Every year, teachers ask me what to say when kids ask them if we were really slaves in Egypt, and if the sea really parted, if Abraham and Sarah were real people, or if the Torah is just fantasies for the naive, kind of like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. Like right now, I have a student whose bar mitzvah is coming right up. His Torah portion is Noah's Ark. Originally, he refused to have a bar mitzvah because the stuff isn't true, but his parents are making him. He talks about the ways in which religion is a lie that keeps people fighting with each other. I love this kid. I understand from his mother that he will be quoting Spinoza in his Devar Torah. Having never previously studied Karl Marx, he basically came to the same conclusion that religion is the opiate of the masses. But having Judaism as foundational in my life does the opposite for me. My complicated faith in God and my ever-changing relationship to Torah and my roots in Jewish history don't soothe me. Like so many Jewish people, I am an activist because of, not in spite of, my Jewish roots. In fact, I can tell you that the Torah seems truer to me every day. I was sitting there with this bar mitzvah boy, helping him learn to chant his Torah portion, and he is singing what God tells Noah, Ketz kol basar ba lefanai. The end of all life has come to face me. Ki mal'ah ha'aretz chamas mipnehem, because the earth is full of the violence they cause. Here we were, my student and I, reading this right after a massive hurricane hit the Bahamas. Flooding of biblical proportions, destroying 13,000 homes, and I was overwhelmed with the realization that the Noah's Ark story is a little too true. Ketz kol basar ba lefanai. The end of all stands before us. Should we build some kind of ark and start again? By now, you must have heard of the Swedish teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg, who, feeling that adult leaders were willfully ignorant of the devastating climate science predictions, decided to dedicate her life to doing all that she can to stand up for her generation. She said, "You don't listen to the science because you are only interested in solutions that will enable you to carry on like before, like now. And those answers don't exist anymore." And just 11 days ago, here in Santa Cruz, 1,000 marchers gathered downtown for the climate strike, mostly school-aged children. There have been many important marches lately here in Santa Cruz, but this one felt like a turning point to me because most of the marchers were between the ages of 5 and 25 years old. For decades, we have known that we need to reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide and methane. But somehow, Greta was able to initiate a conceptual shift for millions of people, getting people of all ages to act. And I have proof that these actions are helping draw attention to this issue because when my mom, who is not exactly an earth muffin, called me this morning to wish me an easy fast, and she asked me as usual what my sermon will be about, and I told her it was about climate change, she surprised me by responding, "Oh, that's a really important topic." Although the message about climate change is indeed spreading, with your permission, I would like to repeat it, because it is vital that we all understand it and spread it whenever possible. So, may I please have your permission to get intense? Thank you. Climate change is by far the largest social justice issue of all time because it will impact all other social justice issues. Poor people will be and already are affected most. Widespread famine, fire, and flooding are already stimulating oppression, racism, poverty, hunger, war, violence, homelessness, and inhumane refugee and immigration policies. What we do now will profoundly affect those we love most, our children. Our contribution of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere now will make their lives much more difficult than our lives are. And this effect will only increase for their children. This is not climate hysteria. We are messing with the Earth's systems that we rely on for our basic needs. Unfortunately, there is a positive feedback loop in the Earth's climate system, and we are poised to set off a series of reactions, such as melting the permafrost, which will release far more greenhouse gases, which will greatly amplify climate changes we are already seeing. The inconvenient truth that Al Gore warned about is that human activity is increasingly moving our climate system further away from equilibrium, to the point where it could become so unstable that it may no longer support life. There is scientific consensus that if we don't lower greenhouse gas emissions, the effects on our planet will be devastating. Now is the time. Humanity is capable of making the tremendous shift necessary to avoid climate catastrophe, and future generations are counting on us. We cannot afford to minimize the problem, hope that someone else is taking care of it, or that there will be a technological solution that allows us to continue with business as usual. It is easy to lose hope and feel that progress is like a revolving door with people on the other side always pushing in the wrong direction. We are constantly bombarded by disinformation now. We are being told that everything is wonderful, so we can buy more, consume more, reduce environmental regulation, extract and burn more fossil fuel. But these are not new issues. It has always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Lies and disinformation have been around since Adam, the first human, lied to God. And humanity has made it this far. We can do this. We can be part of the change that needs to happen. And our Jewish heritage offers us a wealth of resources to help us carry this burden without despairing, without despair, because though we have been given an unfinished world, it remains a world full of inspiration. Before I go on, I invite you to take another deep breath. And I invite you either to think of someone or something that inspires you, or maybe look into the eyes of the person next to you and take their hand for a moment. Let's take another deep breath. Where do we find the wisdom and perspective we need to get through a crisis, whether it is personal or an existential threat to our planet? How do we, here in 2019, the Jewish New Year of 5780, shape the future so that we don't blow this? What we need is a conceptual shift, individually and also worldwide, like the one Greta has started, only even more widespread. How do we get there? Let's start with Aleph. Aleph, the first Hebrew letter in Jewish tradition, represents everything in the universe. It represents infinity. Aleph is the world before you even begin to have an idea of how to move forward. Where to start? To me, it even looks like it's spinning. See how the top and bottom are kind of like arrows pointing in a spin? Tohu vavohu, the formlessness and void, turmoil. I like how thousands of years of complex, mysterious, wise, and contradictory Jewish teaching can be reduced and discussed through the simplest elements, like the Hebrew letters, like their very shape. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, used to meditate on each letter in his prayers. Aleph, the first Hebrew letter, represents fullness so beyond our capacity to grasp it that it is called nothing. The void that follows death. The transition state before birth. Aleph is used in Hasidic lore to represent the universe before God's very first act of creation. Before creation, there was absolutely nothing but God, nothing but infinity, no movement, no thing. I find it mind-blowing how in cosmology, the Big Bang theory of the origin of the universe fits so beautifully with this. The way it was explained to me by my father, prior to the Big Bang, there was absolutely no matter in the universe. No time, no space, nothing. Then, in one infinitesimal moment, all matter appeared at once and exploded outward, forming everything as the heat from the energy of the explosion cooled. Aleph, then, represents the entirety of the universe before the Big Bang. It was a nothingness so vast, it was beyond our conception. I want to suggest to you that this is the time of the Aleph, the chaos, the void, and that Yom Kippur invites us for just one day to sit within the Aleph, to be empty and open. This is one reason why we fast, to empty ourselves. Before a big change comes a conceptual shift. We have to fundamentally change our society's habits, but first we have to change our thinking. Yoko Ono and John Lennon once did a conceptual art piece around the Vietnam War, where they placed huge posters in Times Square and around major cities announcing war is over, and then in small print, if you want it to be. The idea there is that before you can end war, you have to imagine an end to war. Yoko once publicized an art exhibit of her latest art at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. The people who showed up found nothing there. She didn't have one single thing in the gallery. She explained that this was a conceptual show. It was all in her mind. Although it wasn't very inspiring to the people who showed up, of course, I've been thinking a lot about it. The empty gallery is all potential. It's the most uncomfortable place because it could go in any direction. In a way, it's the most creative moment. The moment before you decide which way to go, when you are just empty, open to the chaos and the potential that comes with it. I would say Yoko's exhibit wasn't a joke. It was a statement to humanity. We need to go back to the point before the place where we often get stuck. Our mind's inability to envision humanity's potential. That's what Yom Kippur is all about. We need to empty ourselves, and from that empty, vulnerable place, to shift our priorities, to open our minds and hearts, to reimagine humanity working together to reach our potential. According to the Jewish mystical view of the creation story, a slight change, a precursor to creation, occurred in God's consciousness, a purely conceptual movement out of the nothingness, but intangible, called wisdom, Bina. Notice that Bina, wisdom, begins with the letter Bet. After the open potential, the void, the chaos, the Aleph. But before you begin moving forward, before the first step, comes the imagining and envisioning, the gathering of spiritual connection, fortitude, and strength, the Bet. The Torah doesn't begin with an Aleph. Bereshit, the Torah begins with a Bet, because Bet faces forward. Hebrew goes from right to left. This is us facing forward, the dot in the middle of the Bet. Bet is the gathering of energy, of spiritual resources, letting go of the past, what we thought we needed, how we thought things had to be, getting unstuck and ready to move. We have come together for connection and prayer to summon the spiritual resources we didn't even know we had. Spiritual communities all over the world are beginning to address the climate crisis as a spiritual crisis. Reverend Malcolm of Alabama Reverend Michael Malcolm, is dedicating his life to rallying religious leaders to join him in addressing what he calls the spiritual and moral deficiencies of overconsumption, which are fueling our devastating climate crisis. In a recent interview on NPR, Reverend Malcolm said, "We see everything as commodities. And we look at people as commodities. We look at land as a commodity," Malcolm says. "We also look at our relationship with God as a commodity. We treat God just like we treat the land. We just take, take, take." The human flaw that Reverend Malcolm is naming is referred to in the Torah when it says, "Man does not live by bread alone. Ki lo al halechem levado yichyeh ha'adam." This means that we should always guard ourselves against becoming too materialistic, because the material world is never going to fully satisfy us. We will always want more and more wealth in a vain attempt to feel secure and happy. But man does not live by bread alone doesn't just mean that. It can also teach us that should a catastrophe strike which deprives us of our bread, or some other physical necessity, health, home, income, family, if we have our spiritual foundation in place and can draw on that resource, it can help us weather the storm. This is a good place to do that. Yom Kippur offers us this opportunity. Let's take it. Yom Kippur reminds us of our mortality, of the finite time we have on earth, and the urgency to get ourselves out of the places we are stuck and get our lives on track. It has a very clear procedure for us. This pause to empty ourselves can be the first step, the Aleph. Teshuvah, turning inward to face oneself and the spiritual failings of our society. This is the place of chaos, not knowing, but it is also the place of open potential. Then, tefillah, the bet, contemplating what we want to happen, imagining it happening, asking for spiritual guidance, gathering wisdom and insight. This is an essential step because big problems require big strategies. For our children and their children, we must find new pathways toward renewed climate stability through education, conservation, and innovation. When there are no solutions in sight, we need to visualize them and imagine them and then create them from every angle, spiritual and physical. You never know. Your ideas might be an essential part of the solution. And finally, tzedakah, righteous action. All of us moving forward and manifesting our vision. Gimel is going, see? It's got its shoes on, and it's taking the next step. If you've been to protests, rallies, and marches lately, you may have heard Melanie Denor's song, "One Foot in Front of the Other." I know you're scared, and I'm scared too, but here I am, right next to you. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. We are going to have to draw on faith because we don't know yet how we will get there. Judaism has given us so many messages to prepare us for this moment, if we are willing to listen and rise to the occasion. May we find the inspiration here we are seeking. Let us strengthen each other with our teshuvah, our repentance, our tefillah, our prayers, and with our tzedakah, our righteous action. With our infinite capacity to gather all the light we cannot yet see.